Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. On today's episode, Moshe and I are excited to continue our series on startups. Today, we're speaking with co-founder and CEO of Samepage.ai, Sahil Jain. Let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Sahil.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Great to have you. Hey, Moshe.
Hey Matt, hey Sahil, welcome to the show.
Thank
Uh,
you. Thank you.
been really exciting to hear what you're talking about and what you're building, because the root of it, and we'll get to it in a second, is really about communication, and communication is so important for product people. So I'm really interested to hear about that. But before that, tell us a bit about yourself. Where you're from, what's your background, and how did you get to build a product for product people?
Sure. Okay. So I'll start from the very beginning. I was born in the US. I was born in Portland, Oregon. I lived in Brazil. I grew up in a bunch of places. I grew up in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Houston, Texas, and then mainly the Bay Area, California. My first real job, I guess, where I made money was playing video games. So when I was 15, I was playing a game called Counter-Strike and then doing sports and, the typical stuff that a 15-year-old boy was doing. And then what got me into technology was actually through gaming. So I didn't have a lot of cash myself, and my parents were pretty mindful about how much they would give me. So I used to build my own computers. It was just cheaper to do it that way. And so that's what really got me into technology and really obsessing over little things and drivers. And at some point too, I remember playing some online games and they had subscription fees. And so I was like, well, I'll just try to spin up my own private server and build the little characters, the NPCs. So that got me into technology. And then the summer after my junior year of high school, my mom said to get off my ass and actually go get a real job. And so we had a friend that was at Yahoo. Yahoo was still pretty cool back then. I think they're kind of cool now. They're coming back. But I interviewed with the QA team, the mobile QA team. So this was in 2007 before iOS and Android had come out. And Yahoo Mobile was actually doing really, really well. And if you remember when the first iPhone launched, it actually, most of the apps were by Yahoo, like Yahoo Sports, Yahoo Weather, Stocks. Anyways, I had no software skills, but they liked what I had done, I guess. It was a very remedial, low-level job. I was a black box QA tester. So I had a device cabinet of 200 devices. I had to test all the Yahoo apps on those devices, like the old Sidekick devices, the Nokia N whatever, 95s, etc. But as a typical 17-year-old, I was very rebellious and I hated sitting there and I felt like I was way better than that. And so I was complaining a lot. And I was in a bullpen with actually these like really sweet older kind of Indian women who like took me under their wing and said, well, if you don't want to do it yourself, why don't you just learn how to automate it? And so back then we used Perl for automation. And so they taught me how to code in Perl and build out all my automation that way. And so actually it was a really fun job. I stayed there for about a year and a half. I didn't go back to high school, so I dropped out of high school. I worked as a platform engineer at Yahoo, and that was pretty fun. And I also got to work on the very first iPhone, so I've had one since then. So it's kind of actually fun looking back at it now. And then let's see. So after Yahoo, I decided I wanted to try college, not for vocational training, but just to kind of do the college thing, grow up and mature. And also, my dad was totally okay with me dropping out, my mom not so much. And so to
I can
appease her,
imagine. I can imagine.
yeah. My dad was actually a village kid from India, but also an entrepreneur, started a big fiber optics company. So he kind of got it. And he was like, well, worst case, he'll just go back. Like, it's not a big deal. My mom was like, oh my God, his whole life is ruined. And so I applied to college mainly to appease her. I didn't even really intend to go. And I was fortunate, got into a few places. I ended up going to UC Berkeley and I attended Berkeley for philosophy. So I was really, my dad and I talk about philosophy. We talk to each other probably a couple times a day. He's a huge philosophy guy. So it's kind of a fun way to connect. So I went back to school. While I was at Berkeley, I was working for Yahoo for a little bit, and then I decided to be a full-time student. I really didn't like being a full-time student. And so I worked at a magazine company in the city called Hartle Media. They were doing 7 by 7 San Francisco, California Home and Design, and they were trying to figure out how to build their first mobile app. So I kind of helped them do that. And then a lot of my friends from Yahoo left and went to AOL. This is when AOL spun out of Time Warner. And they had a consumer applications group like Yahoo Mail, AIM, or sorry, AOL Mail, AIM. So they said, hey, why don't you come work for us if you're kind of bored at school? So I joined AOL, and when I joined AOL, I joined as strategic initiatives, which was a super one of those typical big company random titles. But really, I did like corp dev. My job was to meet with a bunch of young founders and startups, and potentially buy some of the small teams and products for the mail and mobile space specifically. And that was actually my first foray into the startup world. I remember vividly sitting in a room. There was a guy named Darian Shirazi, who's actually a pretty well-known investor now of Gradient Ventures. And he was just so much smarter than everyone in that room, including me. And so actually, instead of it being this really like glamorous story, I was super envious. I was like, wow. I was like, it kind of hit me that I thought I was like the smart whiz kid in the room, and it was really him. And we were bringing in a bunch of the early Y Combinator teams. There were only two batches of YC that had gone through at that point. This was like, I think the winter '08 batch had just finished. And that was same batch with like Reddit, et cetera. So, anyways, two of the founders that graduated from that, they're two engineers and they needed a business co-founder. So I brought them into AOL, and then lo and behold, we actually hit it off. And they said, why don't you come join us as our third co-founder? So that was my first company. That was called Trigger.io, and it was dev tools. It was an application development framework, so you could build mobile apps from one code base for iOS and Android.
Mm.
Did that for 2 years. Halfway through that, typical startup, we were really small, raised a couple $1 million, and my job is to run all of our business stuff. So I started running our first ad campaigns, had no idea how to. And it was, back in 2008, 2009, it wasn't just Google Ads anymore. The other ad platforms were coming out. And so I wanted to, even though we didn't have a lot of money, I wanted to experiment. Like if I was spending 5 grand a month, I wanted to try it on Facebook. I wanted to try it on LinkedIn ads. So that was when the idea for my kind of my longest standing company that I had run came about. So it was, how do you manage all of your ad campaigns across search and social in one place, instead of an Excel spreadsheet?
Mhm.
And that's when a year later, a friend of mine, Owen, actually McCabe, who runs Intercom, he took me to an Irish pub. I was just 21, so he bought me a Bulmers and said, and I had just been offered $1 million to start this ad tech company called AdStage, and I didn't know if I should do it or not, if I should leave Trigger. And we were only one drink in, so it certainly wasn't that. But he basically convinced me and said, "Wow, I just want to see what a 21-year-old can do with $1 million." So that was it. Next day, I went in, resigned from Trigger, started AdStage with my co-founder and CTO, Jason Wu, who's my co-founder and CTO for Samepage. We ran that business. We raised like 17 million bucks, had about $4 or $5 million of ARR, SaaS revenue, 800 customers, grew the team to about 45 or 50 was our peak, and ran the company for 8 years. And so we sold that company back in March 31st of 2020. So right in
Wow.
COVID, one
Wow.
month into COVID.
Wow.
Yep.
I think if the deal was any like a week or two
Any
later,
later.
it would not have closed,
Right.
would be my guess. So
Wow.
anyway, we thought we were going to stay at the new company, TapClicks, for like a year. We ended up staying for 2.5 years. I think we needed a lot more recovery than we expected. I
TapClicks was the company you sold it to?
TapClicks was the company that we sold
Mhm.
AdStage to.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so I, was living in Italy, working from Italy for 6 months, picked up
Man, you
Italian.
live the life. You just say Italy and I'm sold.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was like the perfect country to slow down, I
Mhm.
think, because like nothing gets done there.
Mhm.
I love Italy dearly, but nothing gets done there.
I know
So
some good startups from Italy. So
no, they're great entrepreneurs. I met a
and
really
I know
cool.
some great product people from Italy. We just had one recently on
We
our
did. We did.
yeah.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they definitely. I meant like my air conditioner broke, and they kept telling me they're going to come the next day, and it took like 6 weeks. Anyways, so we were there for 2.5 years, and then just to wrap on how we got to same page, all the while I kept this document called "I Got 99 Problems," and it's where I would just list one line like a problem that I'd come across in business. I like B2B software, and I would just tuck that away. I wouldn't think much about them. And then as Jason and I were kind of like, okay, I think we're kind of ready to start the next thing. And every week, my promise to myself when we sold the business was every week I would talk to two or three VCs or founders just to catch up. So what I would do is I'd record all those conversations. I would usually kind of share the two or three things I was thinking about from that document and see how they reacted, like their facial expressions. Did they actually ask any more questions, or was it just pleasantries? And one of the ideas was about, man, when every time I've been at a company, you go to a meeting and people just don't know what's going on. You spend the first, 20 minutes catching people up. Or the CEO will ask me, I was the chief product officer of TapClicks and I had an org of like 25 people. They'd be like, hey, what's this person working on? What's that person working on?
Mm,
And if I had good one-on-ones and I had just had one, I would know. Otherwise, I wouldn't really. So people just weren't on the same page. And so that was the
mm,
premise for the company is how do you build? We started the company without a product idea. We just started it with how would you go about solving this same page issue? How do you use technology to get everyone aligned?
mhm,
Tons of attempts at doing that. Email, Slack, project management tools, knowledge bases, yet the problem still exists. So
Mhm.
we decided to pitch that. It was two pieces of paper. We pitched it to a few investors that we know and have worked with before, and they liked the team and they liked the problem space, even though we had no idea for a product. And we brought in our head of product, Paul Wicker, who as our third co-founder. So he was our head of
mm,
product at AdStage. We've been working with him for, geez, like 10, 12 years. Jason and I for 14 years. And so that's why we picked the name. And we kind of focused on how can we use technology to get everyone on the same page? How we landed, and we can go into this a bit more, but how we got down to product people, why are we building for product? Is that after doing about 200 calls, we realized that product managers are the ones that have a really big, 80% of their job is communication. Why are
Mhm.
they communicating? They're communicating to
mhm,
keep everyone aligned. Like if you think about most things a product manager creates, whether it be a PRD, whether it be a linear issue. Those are all things to get other people kind of up to speed or on the same page.
Mhm.
So if we
mhm.
can solve this same page problem for product people first, then we can hopefully expand it to everyone in an
Yeah,
organization. So
amazing.
sorry, long background, but that's kind of the whole story arc of how we got to where we are.
But that's
That,
that's really interesting because you probably did a lot of the things that product people do in many of those positions in the past,
mhm,
but you're not coming from a traditional product management position, but
Mhm.
you identify that this problem that is much bigger than product problem, and for product people, the first people that actually have this problem when building products are the product people.
Yeah.
So I love all of those directions from all of those insights that you have throughout the years. And based on your story, it seems like it takes time to also find this information and distill the information and really get to the right problem to solve.
Hmm.
And probably now, right now is the right time based on all of your experience and based on the technology that exists these days. So
Yeah.
that's
yeah.
really, really cool.
As you were going through it, I was thinking about opportunities. There's been opportunities throughout your journey and throughout your story. And I was trying to think about that. Like, not everybody realizes the opportunities they have, and they're not always aware of it. So as
Mhm.
things come past you, you kind of build on that experience, and then you get to where you are. So I thought that was a great story.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would say I won't take it sounds a lot better in retrospect. It seemed a
Hmm.
lot like there was a lot more thrashing when you're in the zone, in the moment, even coming up with the ideas. It's like a random dinner that you have with a friend or
Yeah,
something. It's never as simple
that's
as it
it.
sounds, right?
Well, I think most people aren't aware of that. They don't tune into it all the ways. So
Yeah.
you sometimes you're in a place and you don't realize it until maybe after the fact. You're like, oh, that was an opportunity to do something, to pitch an idea, to bring up a topic, to talk about with other people who, so I don't think always people are attuned to that. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My problem is usually the opposite, that I'm tuned to too many problems, and then I find myself doing too many things in parallel, which is
There
also
you go.
not good because it's hard to focus on one thing.
Got to find the balance.
So
Yeah.
tell us about Same Page, where you are right
Sure.
now with the product, and how does it help with this problem of communication and collaboration and being on the same page?
Yeah. So good question. So with same page, our problem statement, I think, is very valid, which is, how do you solve for information asymmetry? That's how we kind of position the problem. Now, trying to think about what product to build, we had to think, well, why is there information asymmetry? How is that caused? The thing about it is that people are not on the same page for like a multitude of reasons, right? Maybe they didn't read an email, or maybe they read the email and didn't understand it. Maybe they missed a meeting. Maybe it's a cultural thing, right? A lot of us, when we're sharing updates in companies, most of us want to share the good stuff. We don't share necessarily all the real stuff. And those types of kind of political or cultural norms inside of an organization will also shift how a company shares, how transparent they are, how they communicate. So trying to align and figure out how we wanted to approach solving the problem is still challenging. We started with our first product. We said, okay, we think this is going to be a communication tool, but what does that mean, right? When you think communication tool, we probably all think Slack, or we think
Mhm.
Zoom, or we think email. So I said that especially while this AI stuff was happening, which is kind of during the course of us starting the business, we started right before, like officially incorporated right before the GPT stuff started happening.
Mhm.
I said the hardest problem is how do I somehow delete the knowledge of the existing communication tools I have in my head so I can wake up the
Mhm.
next day and think about something truly novel? And that's actually I still haven't figured out how to do that. It's a super challenging task. Like I wish it was like back in the Men in Black days and they could just like wipe your brain, so you didn't know. And then because I wonder what communication tools we build if we woke up tomorrow not having any preconceived notions of prior ones. So anyways, okay, so that's a bit esoteric, but what we thought about was, all right, let's build a communication tool because theoretically, if people communicate better, then they'll be more on the same page. So we built a first little prototype that we always wanted to build something a really what we think an MVP is something that's so minimally viable that it's like for most people it's not useful, it's not usable. And if you were to take one feature away from it even, it would be like totally dead in the water. That's what we think a true MVP is. So the very first product actually came up. A friend of mine, he was actually my first boss at Yahoo. He went on to be a VP of product at Nike. I think he's at Starbucks now. Really cool guy named Paul Rydell. And Paul had told me that at Nike, he'd have all his team send in every week like a 2 to 3 minute audio clip of their update of what they've been working on, what happened the previous week, what's happening maybe this week. And then someone would kind of compile those together into like a mini internal podcast that all the execs and stuff would listen to on the way in. And I thought, well, that's kind of like, it's like a crude, but maybe effective way to go about it. And so let's start there. So the very first product that we built for Samepage, and we call it our V1, was really an audio video first, structured, opinionated, kind of Slack-like experience. So you'd get a notification, hey, your updates are due on Wednesday, and then you could use a variety of different formats, and you could record yourself, and you could, screen share video, audio, and then you would share it into a stream that would go to a bunch of people, and that was our first start. Then last year, as this ChatGPT wave and just the generative AI wave was happening, we said, okay, but before we entrench ourselves, so we invited 100 teams to that first product. We probably had about 20 that were using it in closed beta, and we actually still use it today. But we said, all right, that's one way of solving the problem. Let's try a different approach to solving the same problem because we really wanted this time around not to get too obsessed with our product idea, but try a couple different solutions. And we were fortunate enough to have raised capital. We've kept the team super small. It's just the three of us and we have a few freelance designers. This allows us to like shift very, very quickly. And I think this is a huge like secret weapon for early stage companies,
Mhm.
especially now with all the AI stuff that's happening. It truly does
Mhm.
help kind of compound on productivity.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
anyways, we built the first V1, then we kind of went back to the drawing board, so to speak, last year. And we said, all right, with this generative AI stuff, with the LLMs in general, what could we do? So I said, well, another approach to this problem would be if I could implant the same information in your head, Moshe, in your head, Matt, theoretically we're on the same page, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
let's start with like a more information first approach to this communication product. And then
Okay.
this was actually during last year is when we figured out, oh, and we should probably pick a job function and go more narrow in our product solution.
Mm.
And that's when we decided product managers have this same page problem. They're like the glue person that has
Mhm.
to keep everyone aligned across PDE, product design engineering, to go to market teams, to the execs. So I think picking the job function was so far in the last 2 years, our best decision that we've made. And then we started getting to work. So what Same Page does now, we just soft launched the company. So we didn't even soft launch the company for our V1. We did for our V2. We liked the direction of the V2 about 6 weeks ago. We just started inviting our first few PMs and product teams to the tool. We have kind of the typical wait list, but we kept probably invite 3 to 5 per week. We keep it small intentionally so we can actually build for them.
Mhm.
And this new product, what it does is the very first thing a product person does, they log in, they link various data sources that they use and that they need information from. So that's
Mm.
like Notion, Slack, their own Google Calendar, Gmail, Linear, Jira, the list goes on. We then build this feed for them. It's an AI generated feed of what we call like automated blocks. So every day, AI will go through and summarize that tool, any activity in that tool for that user. So things that they should pay attention to, conversations that happened on Slack, tickets that people have been talking a lot about or moved in terms of status. And then really what we do right now for the V2 is we help the PM build a couple different types of communication. So for example, we call them streams. So streams is like a workspace. We have three core stream types to start the closed beta. The very first one is weekly status updates. So every PM we spoke to sends some form of weekly status update. If AI has all your work exhaust is what I call it, it could probably help you write a pretty decent weekly status update.
Mhm.
So our copilot, we call it an AI copilot for the product manager. You can literally say, hey, help me write my weekly status update, or we have some pre-canned prompts. And it'll actually look at your previous data, look at your calendar, look at your Slack, look at the documents that you've penned, and it'll write up, hey, last week you did this week you're probably focused on this stuff. So the weekly status update is the first thing that a lot of us don't like doing, but it's very necessary to like propagate information across an organization. The second use case is release notes. So a lot of PMs have to write release notes, whether it's them or the product marketer. So we say, all right, well, our Copilot can go look at GitHub. It can go look at the linear issues or the Jira tickets, and it can write up pretty decent release notes. Remember, with all of this stuff, we believe in human in the loop. AI kind of gets like 80% right, but then you need that interface to be able to edit it and change it. Maybe there's something that you don't want to have in external release notes versus internal release notes. So you can ask the Copilot, generate a series of release notes for my sales team, generate one for my technical team, and then generate one for our customers. So, and then the third and final use case that we've started with in the closed beta is how do you collect all the information from all the user feedback sessions that you run?
Mm.
And then how do you share the insights from those? So Paul has been running all of our user feedback sessions for this product, and he's probably done over like 200. Now, you're not going to go look at all 200, but what you want to be able to do is say, hey, what are some of the 5 feature ideas that have come up from all these conversations? Or what are some of the trends? What is the sentiment around, are they liking what we're building at Samepage or not? So
Mhm.
we basically really simply help the PM create an update for each one of those areas. Release note is an update, essentially, weekly status updates. And when you run a user feedback session, we want you to be able to very quickly create an update that has the insights from that. So
Mhm. Mhm.
that's where we're at today. It's not rocket science. We're not saying this is the billion-dollar company, but these are real. We're not saying we're like an autonomous product manager that we're building. We're just trying to be kind of a communication product
Yeah,
for the product
yeah.
manager.
You touched on a lot of things over there, and
Yeah.
and I like, the lean way that you're doing that. That's great. I would encourage not just product managers to listen to this episode, but also to startup founders, no matter what they found, right? But in general, what I find with the communication are two main things. One of them is that people consume data in different ways.
Hmm.
So the people have different ways to learn. And because the way they learn in different ways, that's also how they consume data. And then the
Hmm.
second thing is language understanding, even if they speak the same language, English, let's say, for the sake of the argument here, they still understand words and phrases and the way you put words together in different ways. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's also because of the way they learn and because even maybe have learning disabilities or they skip some words or they give different meaning to them. And that could be
Totally.
also based on their culture. So culture is a third layer to that, that coming from different countries and working together or coming from even different families in the same city could have different culture. And then on top
Yeah.
of that, you have to merge all of them together into the same culture of the organization.
Yeah.
So the fact actually that you have multiple ways that you go by it makes a lot of sense
Hmm.
because it might mean that one way might not work for everyone, and
Yeah.
therefore there need to be different ways. but it also makes things much harder for the people that need to create this, information. And I'm teaching also a bit as instructor in a university where I have a class of 50 students. I need to adjust the way I teach to some of their learning abilities or learning capabilities or
Yeah.
culture. So how do you deal with all of that?
Yeah, so that's actually the area that you and I spoke about, prior to the show,
Hmm.
that I'm most excited about.
Hmm.
So for me, I always, my goal when I'm starting a company, I always say my dream is to like have Wayne Tower in Batman, where I have this R&D lab at the bottom, and I get to work on a bunch of really crazy, weird stuff, and everyone else can run the business.
Mhm.
So I had a version of that in AdStage, and a version of that in Same Pages. This communication problem, like how you solve, if you think about all the big management consultancies, when they come into a company today, and this was decades ago as well, when they come into an organization, one of the number one problems an organization says is their communication is an issue. So you have to wonder, why is that? And so for decades, we've been focused on, when we say we want to improve communication, most of us and most of the technology has focused on improving the efficiency of communication. Or how do we make the transmission of information faster, shorter, right? So for example, we've taken long form communication, we've made it short form, we've changed the medium and we've made it into video. And that's important. Improving the efficiency of communication and the transmission of it is important. But what you just touched on is probably the topic I'm most excited about, which is, how do you pay attention to the interpretation of information? Because it's not so much that did you send the email? What if the people didn't read it? Or what
Mhm.
if they didn't understand it when they read it? Or maybe they understood it in the moment, but a week later, when you have the meeting about it, they can't recall it. Information recall. So the true issues on getting people on this to solve getting people on the same page, I always tell our team, and they agree 100%, we can't be a product that just creates more communication, right? Once you start breaking into any of these, people say, well, I write my weekly update. I don't know if anyone reads it.
Yeah.
Or I write my release notes. I have no idea if anyone reads that. And it's not just about, do they do the act of reading, do they understand it the way that you intended for them to understand it? So actually later this year, I'm going to be speaking at Industry, and my topic there is mastering the art of communication for product managers and product leaders. And the side of the coin that I'm going to focus most on is, as a product manager, how do you pay attention to, when you say something, does that intention get transmitted across and relayed across the way that you intended it? So
Hmm.
if you guys remember, like when we were kids, we used to play that game called Telephone, and you'd
Hmm.
start with like one statement, and then as you would go from person to person, that statement would morph, it would
Mhm.
mutate. So these mutations occur. They have a possibility of occurring anytime information goes from one system or person to another system or person.
Mhm.
So, what technology will be present to actually make the communication not just more efficient, but more effective? And when you get into making communication more effective is when it gets really fun, but really challenging, because now you're starting to go into things like the learning sciences. Or there's a really great philosopher named George Herbert Mead. And a big part of Mead's work is around the interpretation of information. Like you were saying, Moshe, it's about language. And in language, every word is really what? It's a symbol. And that symbol has a meaning ascribed to it based on how multiple people observe or perceive that symbol. So if they have the same shared understanding of that symbol, then they'll sort of be on the same page around that symbol or that
It's
word.
even more complex than that because it's the
Yeah.
context of that symbol, and the
Yeah.
context could be in a sentence or in a paragraph or in a whole essay, but it can also be orally and with the body language and how you actually say the word. So there is so much complexity around that.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's why with Same Page, some days I wake up very frustrated because I really want to work on that stuff. But I also know that that area is very, like, not black magic, but there's still very little that we understand as humans. And so figuring that out, maybe there is no like solution, but I guess in a startup, the goal is like not to have a solution that's a perfect solution, obviously. It's just to make it a little bit better. So what we're working on right now is just to like, can we build something that makes it just a little bit better? So the communication that comes from Same Page is a little bit higher quality, or it's summarized in various different ways so that other people who ingest the information, the consumer of the information can consume it in the way they like, the medium that they like. Like maybe an update is written format, but it turns into a little podcast or audio, or that's like these are very like simple examples, but
Mhm.
I think that's the area that we're most excited about. And I think the companies that do that super well at the moment are actually not communication products. If you think about like Slack, for example, Slack is just okay with you having a ton of noise, right? The signal to noise ratio is very
Mm,
poor.
yeah.
That's
But
there. And
yeah,
yeah, that's part of the
sure.
viability of the organization, I guess.
That's right. But that doesn't really help us solve the problem of
Yeah,
communication.
yeah,
And so, and nor does email. But actually, the language learning applications, like Duolingo, for example, they do an awesome job when it comes to things like promoting learning in a way where you're actually going to retain the information and the knowledge of learning a new language. And
right.
they do that through a bunch of different exercises. Sometimes, let's say you're learning Italian, you're writing it out in Italian, or they tell you to write it out in English, or they tell you to pick the words to match and fill up the sentence, or they say to say things audibly or hear
Yeah,
things audibly and then scribe it out. And now
yeah,
they even have like these virtual classrooms where you're going around asking people because interaction improves the retention of information.
yeah, yeah,
So it'll be super interesting to see the day that we can start baking that in, but it's really kind of like part of the ethos of our company. And actually what keeps me going because the days that I'm like, man, I don't know if we're building the right product, what anchors me is, but this is a real problem. So at least we picked a real problem.
yeah.
Yeah, for
And
sure. Yeah.
saying that, I would even say I don't want to put, for you to put the vision and strategy out there, but I would even say that the vision in the world that I see for SamePage is to solve these problems of how people are actually interpret the data and use the data. But this is a high, lofty goal or very hard problem to solve. The strategy to get there is via trying to do different things, different opportunities that will get you to learn over time, what actually get you closer to that.
Yeah. I always kind of just say like we have to earn the right to go tackle the big problem. So
Yeah.
let's start with something that almost like, very honestly, and I think a lot of startup founders would resonate with this. I wake up some days, I'm like, man, what are we building? It seems so
Mm,
small. Why are we building a tool that helps the PM write release notes? Like most of the things that we're helping the PM with today, they already do. We just
mhm,
think if we can centralize it into one place, it's a little bit better. We're not the
Mhm.
10x product yet that we want to be, but I think you kind of have to have a lot of a leap of faith mentality in running a company and doing a startup that, okay, once you get the first 10, 15 people stuck in, it'll become clear what you need to get the next 50. And
Mhm.
you won't know that now, but you just have to wait and do the right things, like talk to your users a lot, make sure you're running those feedback sessions. If they sign up and use it once and never come back, that's information for you. And then your job now is to go try to message them and say, hey, why didn't you come back?
Yeah.
the shared understanding piece of that, like as product managers, we're on lots of internal and external phone calls. You're not always positive coming from those, leaving those calls. Like I always have that image of three people leaving a room. One's thinking the square, one's thinking the triangle, one's thinking the
Yeah,
circle.
exactly.
And I'm like, did everybody actually have that shared understanding that I have? Like, there's no confirmation of that. Like, and as you add more people to the call, there's less of that. That might be that black magic of trying to like solve that somehow, like you mentioned.
Totally. And I think that's like, if you guys think about for a second, like with all the great product people you've had on this pod and just in general, the folks that you guys know, when you think of the best product managers you know, what qualities come to mind? And I guarantee that some form of the word like communication, that they're a good communicator, is one of the top qualities,
Mhm.
or how they act in their demeanor is represented by their communication. You think of that person who like they just made sure that the agenda was always set, they got the action items, they kind of followed up with things, they kept engineering in the loop, they kept the executive team in the loop with their weekly board slide or whatever the case may be. So for product managers, I think like the first step in solving this and approaching it is just being aware. So a big part, and this isn't like ruining the talk that I'm going to do later in September, but it's more of like my goal here is like the very first thing is just attending this event and being aware that these mutations occur when you
Hmm.
convey information. So like Matt, in your example, if the PM is running that meeting, they should be very aware that the three people that are consuming may walk away with different shapes in their mind. And
Hmm.
so just being aware means you might repeat yourself a lot more, and that's okay. maybe to a point where you annoy people, but at least they walk away all thinking triangle. So
Right.
there are, and so it's frequency is one way, is like a crude way to solve this is, back in the day, my dad told me this story, but I forgot there's like a term. I think there's a term for it. I haven't read any business books, so I don't actually know these terms, properly. But there was like a way that a lot of in the manufacturing world, you would manage from the floor. I think it was something like that. So you didn't
Hmm.
sit in your office. If you were like a VP of production or engineering, you'd go to the floor, the factory floor every day, and you would just talk to the engineers, ask them what they're working on, why are they doing it in a certain way. The reason they did this was not to micromanage or to be a helicopter manager. Some probably did, unfortunately. The reason they did this was because they're gathering data points of do my 100 across my 100 engineers, do they get it? Are they
Hmm.
aligned? And the product manager needs to do that whenever they're conveying information. How many times at companies have you heard the horror stories where two product teams are building the same thing and they had no idea? It's surprising that this still happens. It happens all the time,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
right? Or the
Yeah.
product manager tells the engineer, hey, go build X. The engineer comes back and has built Y. And you could say like, oh, you can get frustrated with the engineer, but again, there's no blame on the person, but maybe they understood Y when you said X. So this is where like just being like very acutely aware that this can occur will help the product manager like tomorrow if they hear this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also the informational drift. So as you leave that
Yeah.
call, you have to make sure that like that triangle stays in everyone's head. So the next time you have a conversation, everyone's coming to the table with the same context of the last one. Like, okay, we haven't drifted on like what we talked about before. So I think that's where like Copilot can come in and help summarize that and keep everyone on the same page,
That's right.
between calls and between action items and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, think about all of us. We go through a week of a bunch of meetings, and at the end of the week, when you're asked to even write like a weekly update, like the reason why we hate it is because we're like, damn,
Yeah, you
I have to remember what I did,
yeah,
and we open up our
exactly.
calendar and or right before you go to a meeting, a lot of PMs are going from meeting to meeting to meeting. They don't even
Yep.
have time to write up their summaries, or they don't even have time to look back at the last time I met with Matt and Moshe, like what happened? What did we talk about? We might
Yep.
know the broad strokes, but in a product world, you can't just operate as a PM on broad strokes. You have to be super detail oriented,
Yeah.
right? So you're totally right. Information retention and recall, I think, are a very big part of the puzzle. And so we don't solve any of that stuff yet today, but that's what we're trying to earn the right to solve.
Amazing. Amazing. You would be surprised how many product managers actually don't communicate and don't know that this is part of their job. Uh,
Yeah.
when I started as a product manager, I had some of these problems myself. And I consider myself, I'm talking 15 years ago, and I'm considering myself, a decent communicator.
Hmm.
But I didn't really understand the relationship with stakeholders. And some stakeholders scared me. Some stakeholders bullied me, and
Hmm.
other stakeholders I was in very good relationship with. So it created this very unhealthy situation for me
Hmm.
that impacted on my communication skills and even want to communicate with some of them.
Hmm.
So that was an issue back then. I learned from that, the hard way, and over time, different jobs, I improved on it or tried to improve on it anyway. But I also learned the hard way what are all the challenges there and how hard this problem is really. Um, you know, People don't use the tools that they have in their hands, and they
Hmm.
don't use the tools that the company as an organization decided that they should use for communication or for whatever it is. But I think we talked enough about that. Do you have already I don't know if you can share any success stories with some of your early clients or
Yeah, I mean,
specific things, how it actually helped
yeah.
people?
Yeah, I mean, the good news, so it's very early. We literally are probably inviting, I don't know, anywhere from 2 to 5 new people into the closed beta per week. The reason we do that is intentional. It's because I've always been frustrated where in closed betas, you join them, you give feedback, and then the feedback doesn't get implemented for like a few months because maybe there's too many people in there or the capacity can't happen. So when I go on a demo, even like the ones I went on yesterday, I tell them, hey, if you give us a piece of feedback by on Monday, we hope to build some portion of that by Friday. Because that's, at the beginning when you're a startup, you're asking people to use a no-name company's little product and take time out of their day to try it. So I always say at the very beginning, like, it's your job to beg and kind of like, really do what you need to do to get those first few design partners in. So going back to your question, yeah, we have a handful of folks that are using it more actively, and they're from a variety of different industries. Most of them are software companies, of course. Um, and the success stories are kind of around the things that I had mentioned. So we had a team on board this week, and they were in within the first, 30 minutes, they connected their GitHub, they connected Linear, and they weren't producing release notes. They're pretty early stage. And they just started producing their first couple release notes, and it automates and sends right into Slack. And now their executives are like, wow, this is what we've been working on this week. Super simple example. Um, in larger examples, what's been really helpful is to work with, because with all these, so every stream type that I explained is basically a product manager use case.
Yeah.
Release notes, weekly status update,
Yeah.
user feedback sessions, writing the PRD. These are all kind of different jobs to be done, is what we really call it. And so we're slowly trying to understand, each of those jobs to be done may sound simple at a high level, but we all know, and Moshe, you kind of mentioned this, right? Every PM is different. How they communicate is different. What one PM's release notes look like is not going to be how the other PM's release notes are going to look like.
Yeah.
So you have to somehow build a solution that's malleable and extensible to the different permutations.
Yeah.
And so the success stories, I guess, would be that we have people engaged. They're trying to use it or are using it for some of those different jobs to be done. And we're very fortunate that we're learning the various permutations and the details.
Yeah.
So the devil's in the details for sure. And even with how someone, AI is not magic. LLMs are a great technology that are wrong often and have a lot of things that they produce that are wrong. And that's okay because it does a lot of the legwork for you. But building the right systems in place to actually meet the user expectation and to give them the controls to change. So
Yeah.
I guess the early success stories, we can't name the customers because we are in a closed beta.
Of course.
But it's really exciting as a founder. If you've been building for like a year and a half or two, you finally get it in the hands of folks, even if they don't use it. Remember, it's all information, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So-
An interesting way that I tried to build release notes maybe 5 years ago with the team that I worked was to get them empowered and really understand why they were building something. So I
Mhm.
want to really empower my developers on the team. I asked them to write the release notes as part of the Jira ticket. So when they're done with the product, with the story, I want
Yep.
them to write the release note as if they were talking to the users.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting way of communication as well, because I learned from that how they understand what they developed, but
Mhm.
also how their skills in actually communicating to outside of their technology hats.
Yeah.
Um, I won't say it was a very successful. We tried it for a while. Then I had someone that was just going through the tickets that was released on the week and grabbing those and
Yeah,
creating
exactly.
notes. But when I went over them as like I'm the PM going through those to see can we release those to the users, there was hits and misses.
Yeah. And there's going to be
But
inconsistencies, right? And like some of them might be more technical, some of them may be less technical. Are they
yeah,
talking about purpose and impact, or are they just talking about what the feature does?
exactly. So that's I trained them a bit. So some of them were actually my background is also engineers, so I know that some engineers could have these capabilities. They can be trained to think that way, and that helped them to understand the users better, right?
Yeah.
I think this is still an important things to do with the developers.
Hmm.
So just giving you another feedback or insights without using your product or anything, but see if that's going to help you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it was, you know, with the release notes, we just needed to pick a few jobs to be done to start with, and then we want
Yeah,
to do all of them.
yeah,
Like, for example, a lot of people have been talking to us about, hey, so the way that we even build out our integrations list was we started with the integrations we use in the company. So like Notion, Slack, Linear, the basic ones,
yeah,
the Google Suite. And then, of course, as we start adding people, they're like, hey, we want Gong, or we need Zendesk
Mhm.
so that we can pull user, stuff from the tickets. And so, or we just got a couple of people asking us for Todoist and Asana. So we just built those. And because again, we set up the infrastructure over the last year and a half, it took us like 2 days to add something like a linear or maybe or Asana. And we're not using MCP or some kind of
I was going to ask you
abstraction.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, or abstraction layer. We built it ourselves, but we're pretty good at integrations because AdStage was all about integrations to the ad APIs. So we had a lot of work for 8 years on how to manage those, manage the integration pipeline, what happens if the imports die, what happens when errors are thrown, all of those
Hmm.
different little details. And so I remember before we even had GitHub integrated, like a few weeks ago, because we knew we use GitHub as well, and we had it integrated in our V1, but we wanted to be very regimented that until someone asks for it, we're not going to build it in, right? And even then, we won't build everything in that people ask for, but we'll consider it. And so we had a prospect. It was a VP of engineering, or sorry, VP of product, and a front end PM and a back end PM. And the front end PM, she said that she was doing release notes, but to comb through GitHub commits and creating the release notes would take her like 2 to 4 hours. And so she actually stopped doing them because it was just annoying to do, and she had a lot of other priorities. So when we went into the Samepage product, we were onboarding them. We didn't have GitHub yet, but we said, well, why don't you just go to GitHub, copy all the commits for the last release, and paste it into our Copilot, and let's ask it to write release notes.
Hmm.
And it did a pretty good job.
Amazing.
Her reaction said it all. She was like, wow, these are actually pretty good. And
Amazing.
so over the next 2 days, we built in a GitHub integration, and now she can just tell the Copilot, hey, using information from the latest GitHub commits over the last 2 weeks, produce these.
Yeah.
And it's for this audience with this tone, right?
Yeah.
So those are some
Amazing.
of the early wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's cool. Yeah.
Um, I'm not sure if I have more questions. What about you, Matt?
I use AI on a daily basis. I
Hmm.
use it a lot during the day as a PM. It really makes me more efficient. So as I'm thinking through this, you mentioned it earlier, like I use different models. So I use Anthropic, I use Gronk, I use OpenAI to a certain degree. I'm not completely on board with their privacy policies and stuff, but so I try to pick my model of choice to give me the best output because I think context is key. I want a true co-pilot. I know you can give it a goofy little, hey, I'm a product manager. I handle APIs and integrations myself. So,
Hmm.
as a product manager that does APIs and integrations, you would want to do such. That's a
Hmm.
little fluffy for me. I want true context and I want like a continuation of, hey, I asked you this before, like an ongoing relationship almost, a partnership. And so that's
Yeah.
the way I think about these things. So you were mentioning the different things you integrate with as well. Like I want to go to HubSpot and give me some ARR. I want to go off to
Right.
Microsoft or Google Workspace and give me some information over there. Knowing that like that if we can somehow get to the point of like product managers, like we don't want to offset all our thought, but I see AI being that like true partner and allowing you to focus strategically and ask those kind of questions and ask that kind of information and then ultimately offloading release notes and PRDs and such like that to where you can really drive business value. Because I think that's where like when it comes to stakeholder management and leadership and working with a business, I think product management goes in that direction. First,
Yeah.
like being that, like that's where like you said the glue. If we're the glue, and I think we're gonna like be focused more in the future on the business side of things, delivering business value, growing revenue. And so that's where a lot of I focus on. So not necessarily a question, but that's how I see possibly same page coming in,
Yeah.
helping the product manager, and then bringing my team in to get that, absorb that kind of information. So,
Yeah. And I mean, it's a good point. And this is definitely what we've continued to hear from great product managers that, and if you think about like, so AI, I'm really excited for the trough of disillusionment for AI, which is going to happen. I mean, AI
mhm,
is awesome and super helpful, but any hype cycle will go through that. And I think we're
mhm.
almost there, is my prediction. And so I think that when that happens, a lot of us will get to the real work. And so one, we called it a co-pilot. Some of our investors have even said, "Oh, you should change it to agent." I don't really care. I
Hmm.
think at the end of the day, like, are we solving the user's problem? You can call whatever you want. In fact, at some point, I don't want to have any sort of AI terminology in it. AI should go back to where it belongs, which is a foundational technology that's in the background. I even
Hmm.
don't like that we have the little AI sparkle in our product. I think that and I get why we do it right now. And I get why that there's this it's a product marketing technique more so than anything else, in my opinion. And it's a little bit of packaging. But I think the reality is AI is going to go more into the background, but it's going to be there, just like any other foundational or underlying technology that helps you complete a workflow.
Yep.
And for me, I think an agent is really just a workflow or feature that calls an LLM, which is new, and that's great. But for us, like I think we're not really worried about all those words. It's that the problem you just described, Matt, with context and being context aware, I think is super critical. That's why we started with integrations and saying how
Mm-hmm.
to interact with multiple of those at the same time.
Yep.
Like in many cases, how Moshe just said that you'll guys in the tickets, you'll actually put some of the reason why you're building something. But then also in the GitHub and in the GitHub commit, you know what actually shipped. It might have been a portion of that feature. So being able to coalesce the different data sets in a way that the PM wants them to be brought together is going to be very important. And then also, I always want the context. So also having the context like before and after to ground me on like, why did we build this thing? Oh, and then, well, three people mentioned it in Zendesk. So that's why we shipped this fix. And a good PM would do that, right? A good
Mm-hmm.
PM in the linear ticket or in the linear issue or the Zendesk ticket would say, these 5 accounts are being affected. But in reality of work, we're all very busy. We're all running around. A big part of the PM job, I say, is, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's taking information from one place, packaging it up in some way, and then moving it to another place.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a big part of what we do as product people. And so that I think is an area where AI can really help, which is like we call it like information like synthesis
Mm.
and then information distribution. So, and that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but it's
Yeah.
like I think that's going to be a big unlock. And there's a lot of products out there in AI that promise to do everything, including the tools that you had just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Most good product people, it's kind of funny, and this isn't dogging on OpenAI. We use OpenAI is what we use to power our
Mm-hmm.
product today. We can be multimodal, but we started with that. But I remember I was at an event and we were all demoing our products on stage to a room of 100 PMs. And this was a week after we soft launched, so we were showing off the release notes use case on stage. And the OpenAI demo was um, pretty underwhelming. It was a demo of creating a PRD
Mm.
with a custom GPT, and it looked really magical. This like 10-page PRD, like populated with all the right headers.
Mm-hmm.
But as all of us have probably, we're all shaking our, nodding our heads when you actually read that PRD, it's
Yeah.
pretty bad,
Yep.
Yeah.
right?
And
So I think
that was a week ago, you said, or 3 weeks
oh,
ago?
that was like, yeah, that was maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it was surprising because that person was, I think, on like their enterprise sales team. So I'm like, man, you should have had a little bit of a better demo. But granted, like, I don't know. Who knows what his worldview is and who he's talking to. A lot of people also are not super on the fringe of AI, like many of us in
Mm-hmm.
technology. So even just getting a template spun up is actually pretty impressive for them. So again, it really depends, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of helps. It helps the product managers like start something. Like one of the hardest things we all know is starting anything, starting a document, starting release notes, starting
right.
like any kind of project. But like, yeah, you can start something. But like, I know Michelle's going to say like, going back and like reviewing it. Don't trust the output. Like, go back and
Yeah.
actually think about it.
That's exactly what I have in mind, but I actually have another comment to make, which is related to what you said about AI being in the background, which
Hmm.
actually that's how AI started.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and the pattern that ChatGPT and the likes created in the world is actually a bad pattern for many products that I'm seeing these days.
Hmm.
Another startup founder showed me a product recently where I have to construct a long
Prompt.
prompt, and it creates this long output that I need to read through. It wasn't a PRD or anything like that. It was something related to the things they were trying to solve. And it might solve me maybe, I don't know, 5 days of work, which is amazing. But on the other end, I don't want to spend my time writing prompts for every little minutia that it needs to know. And I don't want to spend then 10, 15 minutes on reading a very long article.
Yeah.
There are different interfaces that could have given me this much better and much faster.
Yeah.
So if we know what the user wants to do and what their outputs or their outcome they're trying to get, don't give me a prompt and a long article output like ChatGPT, because
Mhm.
that pattern doesn't fit every solution. And that's
Yeah.
exactly where it brought AI to the front end versus being in the back end, where it used to be. Before
Hmm.
ChatGPT, we used AI, we just didn't know we used AI.
Exactly.
When we got all of these suggestions when we were writing emails and it suggested to us the next sentence, that was
Hmm.
AI already. When
Yeah.
it's so there is a lot in the context of where we were doing it. We didn't have to go to ChatGPT and tell ChatGPT what should be my next sentence for this email.
Yeah.
So what I want to see people doing is forget about this pattern of ask me a long question and I will answer you a long answer to solve you some time. Give me the right interface to do what I need to do and do the magic in the backend.
Yeah, that's what, and that's the hope. That's kind of our approach. Like, just I know, just to wrap on this, um, like I said, I have many days where I wake up and I'm like, wow, we raised capital, we started a company to help people build release notes. Like, but I always remind that's just how I wake up and start. Of
Yeah.
course, I go down a couple layers and you say, well, it's not about the release notes. It's about we're building the scaffolding, we're building the
Hmm.
know-how and the product capabilities to produce something of value from different data sources for a PM and
That's
give
it.
them the interface to then share that information, hopefully in an effective way.
Yeah.
And that's transferable to so many of the PM jobs, whether it's release
Hmm.
notes or something else. And I think that's what keeps me going, and that's what kind of grounds our development. And I always have this argument with Paul. I'm like, man, maybe we should work on a more exciting job to be done for the PM. And he's like, Sahil, whichever one you want. It doesn't really matter. And the reason he says that is not to be flippant. He's correct. The reason he says that is because of what I just said, is it's really just getting it doesn't matter if it's release notes, a PRD, a weekly status update, right? Involved in all of those is information retrieval,
Hmm.
information synthesis, some co-authoring, and then information distribution. Let's just nail that, whether it's on an exciting use case or not, and then we can start to get even deeper and build like the true moats or the workflow that Moshe you were kind of referring to is like the UI that helps you pull that off. And I'm really looking forward to the day that we don't have to call ourselves like an AI co-pilot, an AI
Hmm.
agent, whatever. I just want us to go back to being right now. What I tell people in our couple line pitch is we're a communication product for product managers or a
Hmm.
communication tool for product managers. I like that so much better than an AI co-pilot, which the co-pilot's a little bit more descriptive than an agent. I think an agent's a really bad word. Like I have no idea what that means
Hmm.
because co-pilot just means it's with you. So I like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, people come to us say like, "Oh, are you like an autonomous product manager that's going to find every single bug for me and log the tickets?" And I'm like, "No, we're not going to do that right now."
Mhm.
And so that's our fault. That part of our fault is in as an industry, we're all, if you notice, so many of the products we're all regressing to a mean because we're all kind of following one another. So
Hmm.
how many of the interfaces when you log in, it's just a page with a chat box. And most of us, you can actually do a lot of the things that we spoke about. Like you could go into 8 different AI tools right now that are not for product people and ask it to write a PRD and it will. There's
Yeah. Oh,
something
yeah.
weird about that,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so like you could
Might
probably
not
go
be a
into like,
good one, but that's okay.
yeah, but you could probably go into like Harvey, which is the product, the AI tool for lawyers, and you could ask it to write a product PRD, and you're like, a lawyer's never going to do that. And that's my point is I think we're all if being contrarian right now, not just for the sake of being contrarian, but that could be very useful because a lot of people are regressing and they're all kind of getting to this one little mean. But if you're outside, I think as long as you persevere and kind of wait it out, let the dust settle, you might have a bigger opportunity.
Amazing. Matt, any other questions?
No, I think we can probably keep going on.
Yeah, I
But
know, I know.
no, we're good. No, this has been a great conversation.
That was amazing. Where can people reach out to you?
They can just go to our website, samepage.ai, or they can just email me directly, Sahil at samepage.ai. And then, of course, we have the typical socials. So our LinkedIn page is probably the one that we're focused on the most right now.
Mhm.
Um, but they can reach out there.
Perfect. Amazing.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sahil. Appreciate it so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks, guys.
Uh,
Really appreciate it. It's fun. And
yeah,
yeah, we
this has
probably
been,
could keep going on. We could do a whole nother
I
segment.
know. I
Yes,
know.
I'm
My
looking
wheels are
forward.
spinning.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see where it goes in the future. And if any one of our listeners want to try Samepage for their work, please do. Please contact Sahil and tell him that you heard about it on the pod and that you want to be on the beta. And
Yeah, well, any of the
I'm
listeners that are PMs today, we'll expedite them and get them scheduled right away for kind of a demo and hopefully an onboarding if they like it.
amazing, amazing.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Sahil. Thanks, Moshe. Thanks to all the listeners, and we'll talk to everybody next time. Take care.
Thanks, guys. See you
Thank
later.
you. See ya.
Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.